What's going on, guys? This is the Duelist 101 podcast, and we are finally getting involved here on YouTube. And so we're going to see what we can figure out. We're going to start right at the very beginning. And so here's what that means for you guys. Today, this video is all about how to read a card, right? Yu-Gi-Oh is a very specific card game, has a lot of different card text, rules like that. That will be very important for us to learn, and we're going to talk about all of that together real quick. So let me introduce myself from the Duelist 101 podcast team. My name is Zach, and I'm always partnered up with Mason. I'm going to have a little picture right over here. And so here at the Duelist 101 podcast, we realized that we had a lot to learn when we were coming into the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And so we want to go and remedy some of the opportunity that you guys have to learn this game so that we can both share this game together. And it's a lot of fun. We love it. And so that's about it on that. So welcome to all of you listening to this. And so let's get going. So here's the first thing we're going to talk about. The first thing is the overview of Yu-Gi-Oh! So creators of Yu-Gi-Oh! Konami, Kazuki Takahashi. I botched the name so much. So when they're creating this game at the very first of creating it, here is what was going on within the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! They are trying to create this game that, unlike Magic the Gathering, doesn't require any type of key words to know. That way you can just read the card and say, oh, this is what it does, this is how it'll play. And we go from there. And so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to sort of talk through a couple of these types of cards and we'll get into it like that. And so let's do that. I'm going to share my screen with all of you. Here we go. So here is where this all begins. Here, this is EDO Pro. This is a simulator that you guys can go and play on if you are trying to learn something about this game. This is a great place because not only does it help you walk through the game, but now you have an opportunity to be prompted for different things. And so whenever I can do something different, it might go and say activate, or it'll have a little glowing circle on it. I have no way of showing you that right here, but that is okay. And so I'm going to start walking through just a couple cards. And so the first thing we're going to look at, and I need you guys to be looking up here on the top left of our screen. I'm going to show you monsters. And so the deck that I am showing off just right here is Gem Knights. I'm going to try to show off a different deck every single time I talk about this type of the thing. This one is called Gem Knight Garnet. All right. And so there's a couple things that we need to realize about this card. First is how to read it. So when you have a regular card in person, everything like that, it'll be this like tan brownish color, and that's how you know it's a normal monster. And what that means is it has no extra effects. Sometimes it'll just say pyro right here instead of pyro normal. What Yu-Gi-Oh has tried to do is if it releases reprints of different cards, it tries to go and say it's a normal card. That way everyone knows what's going on. And so my boy Gem Knight Garnet here, first off, right here in the middle is always the artwork, right? Now, Konami does this funny thing. It actually does not allow the players to know who the artist is, unlike Magic the Gathering. Kind of just a little interesting tidbit. So this is a normal monster. It doesn't do anything specific, but since it's a normal monster, right down here, it'll have some sort of text, right? And we can read this here on the EDO Pro screen. It says, the Gem Knight warrior who carries the Garnet Soul, his flaming iron fist crushes all enemies. Kudos, go Gem Knight Garnet. So right up here, you guys will notice first the name right up here, and then there's these stars right up here at the top of the screen. Here is the purpose of that. Right up here, these stars make up the level of a card, and so a level is just put on random cards. Like I'd love to say that more levels means more power. That's just not the case. Here recently we had a card that was a 1 star. It's called Jet Synchron. It got banned. It was too powerful. Anyway, all that to say, what I need you guys to notice is that it is a level 4 monster, and we can count that if we really need to, but I feel like you guys have probably a pretty good understanding of that. So it is a 4 star monster, and what that means is we have a way that we can get it onto the field, right? There's going to be some different restrictions, and in the next episode, we'll talk about how to handle that kind of thing. So 4 stars, kind of keep that in mind for next episode. All right, right down here are the attack and defense stats, right? You guys notice the attack right here. It happens to say 1900. We can look down here in this EDO Pro screen so that we can see that. And right here is its defense. It is just at 0, right? So do not want to put this in defense, which we'll get to actual gameplay stuff later, right? And so this is just a normal monster, but I was just telling you guys, sometimes there's some really powerful cards that aren't high in level. And here's what I mean by that. Right here, I have two options. I have first Gymnite Alexandrite, and this is an effect monster. We'll go over to the card right over here and we'll see. Oh, okay. We have the art, we have the name. And I didn't mention this to you guys. Right up here in the top right, this is called the attribute or attribute, whatever you feel like saying that day, I guess. In this case, these happen to be earth monsters, right? It'll always say that just right above it and all that fun stuff. We don't worry too much. If we are looking on the EDO Pro screen, we can look, the first word here will always be the attribute, and the second will be its type. So all the gym knights are rocks because gyms are rocks. So anyway, these are earth rock monsters, and so see how it's much more brown than as compared to the normal monster. We can flash that on the screen real quick. It's much more of a brown color, and so this tells us it has some kind of effect. All right, and so let's see what we can get into on that. Right down here, instead of having some sort of lore, like if you play Magic the Gathering, it'll have its effect every time. And here's what it says: it says you contribute this card, which we'll talk about next episode. Special summon one Gem Knight normal monster, so a monster like this, from my deck. Neat, right? So now if I have something later that I need to get into, and we'll talk about the type of summoning that makes it happen, we can go and use this in order to in order to get other monsters on the field because we might need them more. That's kind of the big thing, right? And then we have another one right over here, just another example. We see that its level is still 4. It's called the Gem Armadillo. It is an Earth Rock monster. And so when this card is normal summon, you can add one Gem Knight monster from your deck to your hand. So that's its effect, right? And so let me tell you guys just a little bit about this field right here. I'm going to breeze through it, and then later I'll actually go and talk about it in another episode. So right up here are your monster zones, all right, the main monster zones, and here they are across from me. And then right up here are the extra monster zones because we didn't have enough in the game. And so this came as part of a history of Yu-Gi-Oh! We'll talk more about that later. And right back here is the spell and trap zone. All right, so spell and trap cards. But Zach, you haven't told us about spell and traps. Let me tell you just a little bit about them here in just a moment. Let me run through this. So first, this is where your main deck sits. Whenever you're playing a game in paper, it sits here on the right side of the field, is what it's called. And then right above it, you put all your graveyard cards. So if you have something go to the graveyard, get beats in battle, or card effect, whatever, it'll end up in here. And here's the banish zone, right? And so we'll talk about what all that means, just not yet. Right over here is the extra deck zone, and you're allowed 15 extra deck monsters. We'll talk about that. Like a lot of this, it's just gameplay mechanics, so we'll mention it later. And right up here is the field zone. All right, so you can put field spell cards, which we'll talk about here in just a minute. And so let me talk through spells and traps real quick. First, we have spell cards. Spell cards are represented by this green color, right? This is a green card, and this is just an example of a spell. We're always right up here, it'll say spell card, right? If you get to old enough cards, though, it'll say magic card, but Magic the Gathering did not like the fact that Yu-Gi-Oh was calling anything magic because they had rights to it, and so it is what it is on that. So these are spell cards. All right, this is just a normal spell. And what I mean by a normal spell is it doesn't have anything fancy up here that tells me it's a different type of card. All right. And I'll talk just a minute about what this card is. This card is called Polymerization. All right. And we'll actually have a whole episode just about this card and what it can do. So it says fusion summon one fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field as fusion material. And so what that means is I can get a card out of my extra deck using stuff that I have, right? And so after that, I'm going to talk about normal traps, and then I'm going to back out of this screen so we can go and talk about some other kinds of spells and traps. So right here is a card called Mirror Force. It is one of the most popular in the game. If you've ever watched the anime or anything like that, you've seen this card all too many times. Mirror Force is really, really cool, and it is a trap card. It'll say that at the top right. And then right on the bottom part, just like monsters, it has its text field. And so it says this. It says when an opponent's monster declares an attack, destroy all your opponent's attack position monsters. Pretty sweet effect. All right. And so let's get into this. We've talked about the very basics. So let me back out this little piece right here and cancel that. And we are actually going to go and look for some different cards. Let me put myself right down here on the bottom so that we can get past it. And so here's what we can do. I'm going to look up right here. This is the EDO Pro screen where you can find cards. There's thousands and thousands of cards in this game. It's sort of ridiculous. And so right here, we can go and see what are some of the types of spell cards. So the one I just showed you, Polymerization, it is a normal spell card. All right. And it is a normal spell card. So let me put that right there so we can see it on the screen. It doesn't have any fancy mark right here. All right. So we would look for a mark right here that tells us it is not just a normal spell card. So let's pull up a quick play spell. All right. So I'm going to pull just the first one. This is Dark Magic Expanded, is what it's called. You guys see this little lightning bolt that's right here? That tells us it is a quick play spell. All right. And I'll talk more about what it means, but in its core, you can play it almost any time. If you've played Magic the Gathering, it's kind of like an instant. All right. So that is a quick play spell. Another type that we have is continuous. So I'm just going to click the very first thing. This is the A forces is what it's called. And right up here, it has a little infinity sign, right? So it goes on and on until it leaves the field. Okay. So that's a continuous spell. We also have ritual spells in this game. So that's a specific summoning mechanic we'll talk about later. It has a little fire right here, right? If you guys can picture it back in the olden days when rituals were a thing, or if that's something you believe now, I guess that's also a possibility. Although, anyway, so rituals, right? So there's this little fire right here, and that tells us it's a ritual spell. Next one we might have is an equip spell. An equip spell has this little cross shape, right? So what this means is we would go and based on what it tells us, if the equipped monster attacks face down defense position monster, gains 1500 attack during damage calc only. Since it's an equipped spell, we would go and say, I equipped this spell onto whatever monster's on my field. All right. And we can keep going. There's also a field spell, and that's pretty important to us. A field spell has a compass instead of a cross. Make sure you guys can see that type of thing. There's a difference, so you can look it up on your own time. There is a field spell which has a compass up here instead of just a sort of cross. And I didn't know what was going to pull up there. It gives the option of link. Those aren't a type of spell, to be clear. So finally, we can look at our traps. We only have a couple of types of this. We have a normal one, which is just like Mirror Force that we just talked about. And let's look at some others. We also have continuous, and so we get to use the exact same logo for that. That is an infinity symbol. So it just means it is continuous. It stays on the field until it doesn't. And then there are counter traps. These are some of the most powerful in the game. Here's what they do. Counter traps usually negate things and destroy it, but it looks like an arrow that's pointed down to the left, right? It like swoops down kind of like Nike symbol style, right? So that is a counter trap. So let's continue just a little bit. We are actually done with the types of cards that you'll see in this game. And I think this is a great way to get started, be done with our very first little bit of this. Next episode that we're talking about is actually going to be talking about summoning mechanics. So I'm going to talk about how we can make these monsters move, and we'll try to make it pretty quick episodes. That way you guys can just kind of clip through it and go ahead and be playing your game like we enjoy it. So let me stop sharing real quick. Thank you guys so much for listening. I do appreciate it. Listening, watching, everything like that. I certainly hope that I've helped you just a little bit. And I promise we will get to the real fun, exciting stuff very soon. It just takes some time. We got to make sure everyone understands what's going on. Thank you guys again so much for listening, watching, everything like that. This is Zach from Duelist 101. Make sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and check out our podcast. It is way further. It's ready to go. And we're going to be starting to consistently post, hopefully, about every Saturday. That would be an awesome goal for us. All right. So thank you guys so much for listening. I do appreciate it. And peace out.